So, as I said, I introduced myself and we're just going to kick right into it. So, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Wendy. Wendy's going to share our executive overview and share more about Pathway Caring for Children.
Thanks, Kim, and nice to meet so many of you. All of you new staff, welcome. Our new associate board member and our community contacts. Thank you so much for joining us today. We can't do what we do without each and every one of you. So a little bit about me. I am, as I said, the executive director. I have been with Pathway, gosh, I'm going close to 30 years here. I started as an intern. I was going to Kent State. And at that time, I needed to find a year-long internship. And I opened up the phone book, so that surely dates me, a phone book, and found Pathway Caring for Children's name. I didn't know anything about them at the time. So I met with their volunteer director and we talked for a bit. And she said, you know, she would love to have me join their intern team. And they had a brand new program that they wanted me to work with. And it was called Therapeutic Foster Care. And this was working with their most difficult foster children that they had at Pathway. So, you know, kind of took a breath, paused for a bit, had never worked with children before. You're telling me I'm going to be working with your most difficult children in foster care? Smiled and said, sure. Well, it certainly was exactly where I needed to be. I was able to work with, in particular, two girls. They were ages 8 and 9 at the time, and I was certainly blown away by their past and their history. I had no idea, in growing up myself with a very supportive family, that children at such a young age could have the lack of supports that these two young children had, ages 8 and 9, and they were in as many foster homes as they were old. So that young and being in so many different foster homes, I did have the privilege to work with them that entire year that I interned. And after that year was hired on as a case manager and did continue to work with them in a case management capacity. And to this day, one of those girls, I still see every now and then that she comes back and is connected with Pathway. So that is one of the things that I love about being here at Pathway, is that we do keep those connections lifelong, for sure. But a little bit about us: we empower our children and families to achieve all the possibilities of their lives. And how we do that is 3 ways. We rescue, we nurture, and we launch. Now, we rescue through foster care. Now, you're going to hear a little bit more about this through Sonia, but we do not take children out of their homes. We get referrals from our surrounding county agencies like Stark, Tusk, Cuyahoga, Portage, Wayne, Carroll. Those counties refer to us. When they have a child that they need placement for, they put out an email to all of the private agencies and we try to match them. Now, we get on average about 50 referrals a week. That's children of needing foster homes every week. Now, we could possibly place maybe about 11 of them. They would be a match for us, but we need more foster homes. It is not a Pathway problem that we have the lack of foster homes. It is a problem across the country. Everybody needs foster homes. There are too many kids that are in need of that care. So if children have to be in a foster home, we surely prefer that they come to us because we know that we can meet the needs that they have. Secondly, we nurture in 2 ways. We nurture through counseling and therapy. We have different types of treatment modalities. We really try to meet the needs of our children where they're at. We can do a one-on-one sit face-to-face, or through this last year and a half, through Zoom, through Teams. We have different modalities that we can do virtually, which is so nice that the state has completely alleviated roadblocks for us to do that to meet our clients' needs. We can do groups. We love doing groups. We are able to reach so many of our children through our innovative groups that we do. We had a group that was a hip hop group. They would come and they would dance and it was therapeutic. We had a homework group that we were able to help them with their homework, but yet process some of the things that they need to process through. We had a sweet emotions group. Child would pick a song that they liked. The therapist in the group would break down the songs based on their emotions. So they were truly getting therapeutic needs met, but it didn't feel like that. Our children have a lot of things that they do throughout the day. You know, they have school, they have behavior issues, they have med appointments, and sometimes, you know, after school, they're just tired. So groups give us a great way to really meet their needs, but it not feel like a group. We just finished our week-long trust camp just 2 weeks ago. We were able to take 30 children to trust camp. They were teenagers, and it is life transforming. We have been able to do, I think it's been about 10 of them that we've been able to do. Last year with COVID, we weren't able to have camp. But I remember one year I went seeing the kids get on the bus, what they look like. And when they came off the bus, they look like a completely different person. Their lives are transformed. They are able to have experiences with the fellow campers that are similar. They're able to identify with one another. So we were so lucky that with COVID this year that we were able to continue that camp. And I said there are 2 ways that we nurture. The second way that we nurture is through post-adoption. Well, that is a niche that we really focus on. A lot of people think when a child is adopted, they're going to live happily ever after. Now, of course, that is the case in a lot of, instances, but when it's not, we are here to help, and we can do that in various ways. We have a support group that we're able to provide to moms, to dads, to grandparents, to aunts, to uncles, to those that are taking care of maybe a neighbor or another type of relationship. And we have, in particular, a mom's breakfast group. We have that one time a month. And these moms come together and they are just able to identify with one another. I have heard moms say, you know what, I didn't know that anybody felt the same way that I feel, that are experiencing the same things that I experience. We do have a curriculum that we follow, but it's just such a great way for them to connect, and it is free to the community. If they need more support, their child can go on respite in one of our foster homes for a weekend. All of our children need a break, and sometimes these families don't have that ability to have a child go to grandparents or go to their brothers or sisters just for a weekend. And we're able to have that just break so everybody can take a breath and then reconnect. Now, if things need a little more structure, we are able to place that child into a foster home. The adoptive parent retains custody, and they work really closely with the foster parents. They work closely with the foster parents. The child goes to therapy, the family goes to therapy, and they come together. And the whole purpose of that is to, process and get that family back together, whatever way that looks like for that family. Maybe, it's just always having that connection there and able to process things. So everybody has a different success story. So we're there to help them in any way that we can. And lastly, we launch through foster care. A lot of our children at the age of 18, they're left to be on their own. And I know at 18, I went to Kent State and I still needed that connection with my family. I still need that connection with my family. We need that. But a lot of times our foster parents are left without, or foster children are left without that. So we really work hard on their independent living skills. We have dedicated classes to teaching how, to fill out a FAFSA, to teach, how to fill out a job application. We take our children on college visits. So we try to prepare them as much as possible. Now we can do that through the community as well. These type of activities are able to go out to those families, in the community that want them. So we really focus on trying to prepare our children as much as possible. Now, just 3 years ago, we implemented a state-run program called Bridges. This is not our independent program, but we do run it. Bridges is a program that is able to help our foster children that age out of foster care up to the age of 21 to prepare them for independence past 21. So as I said, at 18, they're not ready to be on their own. If our young adults choose, they can enter into our Bridges program. They have strict criteria that they have to meet. They either have to be in school or they have to have a job, and they work with our liaisons, and they learn little more in depth of how to manage money and how to, work with the community, how to work with people. So that's such a wonderful thing that the state was able to implement just 3 years ago. So again, I thank you. That is a very quick overview of, Pathway Caring for Children. I know you're going to get a little more in depth from our staff here coming up. But again, thank you so much for joining us. And it was great to meet and see all of you. All right, I'm going to pass that now to Sonia, who's going to talk a little bit more about, yes, we changed things. I am passing this on to Kim. Thanks, Kim.
No problem. I change it up on poor Wendy, and every month she's like, wait, I read the email again. But thank you. Really appreciate that. So, Wendy talked about foster care and adoption being a critical piece to Pathway. And it really is the groundwork for us to start to build stable, loving homes for these children. What we hear in the community, and maybe what you've heard in the community, is that foster parents do it for the money. I'm going to start to set the record straight right now. They do not. There's no way they can't. They are the most selfless individuals, humans that you would meet. They lose sleep. They lose time with their own biological children. They now have to add a child or a sibling group into their home that has experienced trauma, and they have to readjust their entire life just to provide stable support to these kiddos that didn't ask for this trauma. They unfortunately have just experienced it. The love and support that they get once they're in Pathway Care. So it's from the foster perspective, it starts with amazing foster parents, and then it moves to mental health counseling because that trauma needs healing, and that takes time, and that takes relationships, and sometimes it takes years, and other times there's those moments you see that the therapist walks out like, oh, there was a breakthrough. And those are such special moments. But what most people don't know about Pathway is we don't just support children in foster care. We also work with our community to provide counseling services for community-based clients. Today, we serve over 1,000 children for counseling. And the reason for that is we do establish those relationships. We go into the schools. We will go on a playground. We have those groups, as Wendy talked about. We will bring groups of children or teens together. It really is a variety of ways to have children heal, because as we all know, it's not only children in foster care that have trauma. And so we need to make sure that we're there for our community. So Janelle is going to tell her personal story of her family and how she came to find Pathway and what it's meant to her family. So take it away.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Janelle Pascasil, and my husband Jim and I have 4 children. They're all adopted. All 4 of them came to us as foster kids. We were initially foster parents, and then we were blessed to be able to adopt all 4 of them. And we came, and I should say, they all were infants straight out of the hospital, brand new babies when we adopted each one of them, or fostered each one of them at the time. Then we were able to adopt. They're now all taller than me. My oldest is about to turn 21. And my youngest is 17. So they're very close in age. I have a 17, 18, 19, and almost 21-year-old. And so we've dealt with a lot of stuff because, like Kim just mentioned, adoption itself is traumatic. It's beautiful, but it's traumatic. And there's issues with that. Along with that, our son has some disabilities. He's on the autism spectrum. And then I have a daughter with pretty significant mental health issues. And so we've dealt with a lot of stuff, and those things started becoming evident when they were little, 2, 3 years old. And my kids were probably between, I would say somewhere between 6 and 10 when we reached out to Pathway. We were really desperate. I was losing it, if I'm being really, sorry, I'm at work. Of course, my phone rang the minute I unmuted. It didn't ring this whole time. So anyway, we were really, really struggling. We were kind of coming off the rails, if I'm being honest. And I found Pathways through one of those groups. It was actually, though, for adoptive moms. It was specific to, it was an adoptive mom support group. We met once a month and had breakfast together, and I got invited to go to that. And I drove the hour because I'm in Cleveland and the group was in Hartville. And I drove to go to breakfast because I needed to find people who had any idea what I was going through. Because one thing that a lot of times people don't talk about, whether you have foster kids, adopted kids, or your own kids with mental health or disability issues, is it's very isolating. I felt extremely alone. I had a big community of people, family, lots of people who loved and supported us, but they didn't understand. Their families didn't look like mine. They weren't going through the same struggles I was going through. And so we felt very alone. And so I went to this group and found this beautiful community of women. We were all very different, but we had this one thing in common, that we all had adopted children who had been through trauma and were struggling. It was incredibly, it was just refreshing for my soul to feel like I wasn't alone and to feel heard and understood and seen. And through that, we then connected to therapeutic services at Pathway. So we started coming in, and each of our kids got individual counseling. We trekked there once a week to get each of our kids in therapy. And then we started doing groups for families where our kids would get some group therapy, and then the parents would get some group therapy. And we did that for probably 4 or 5 years during a really, really difficult time for our family. And honestly, it was a lifeline. It was a support. I don't know what we would have done without it. It was incredibly helpful. We have stayed connected to Pathway through the years. In fact, my youngest daughter is still in therapy at Pathway and receives those services there. And it's really, it's just been such a blessing. We're so thankful for the help. I can tell you that we looked a lot of places for help and to be understood. And it was very difficult to find the appropriate amount of, it was really hard. There are people who specialize with disabilities. There are people who specialize in trauma, adults and children. There's some, but there's not a lot who specialize in adoptive families and the issues they deal with. And Pathway does that exceptionally well. And I mean, we tried so many places and just felt like we weren't finding the right fit. Like, it kind of is right here, but not here. It's not, that's not what we're going through. And it was like we found home for us, honestly. And we felt really like, okay, these people get it and nobody else seems to get it. And it was very helpful for us that we found, my husband and I both felt like it was the first place we went where everyone wasn't kind of blaming us for what was going on with our kids, which is really hard because you're already suffering and struggling and trying to do all the things. And then everybody's pointing the finger at you and saying, maybe you need to try a sticker chart. And you're like, what? I have an education degree. I know about sticker charts. My kids don't need stickers. And so, you know, it was that kind of thing. Like we just kept getting things thrown at us. It just didn't work. And so it was incredibly helpful. It's still incredibly helpful. We still receive support, like I said, not just in therapy and support groups, but we've also received respite services through Pathway, which has been incredibly helpful. If you don't know what respite is, it's basically like, it's temporary care of a kid who has some special needs and is usually in an adoptive or foster home, and it gives the adoptive or foster parent a break. And that can look like a couple hours, or it can be for a few days or even longer. Generally, we would try to set up scheduled breaks for our kids. And so we kind of separate them, and we keep one or two home so we could really spend individual time with them, because we didn't have any of that when my kids were growing up. Not only because we have 4 kids, but because a couple of them were sucking the life out of us. And so my other kids weren't getting any attention. And so some would go to respite, some would stay with us and be able to just get that individual attention they needed. We do special things together, things that we couldn't do normally. Like we weren't the family that went to the movies and out to dinner. Like, and so we were able to do those kinds of things with our kids individually, which was super helpful. Respite is a huge, huge need. I know it still is, very much so. Obviously my kids are too old for that now. Now I can leave them home and just say, don't burn it down. I'll be back in a couple hours, you know? And so I don't think I'm the only person who has to say that. So, but we really needed those services then. It was a real lifeline for us. So I think I touched on all the points. Oh, I will just say, just to kind of tell you where my kids are at now. We only have 2 left at home. My 21-year-old almost is doing exceptionally well. She's got her own place and working, and she's a great kid. My daughter, who's 19, is the one with the mental health issues. She's actually working and starting to get into the Bridges program that Wendy spoke of earlier. She's in an independent living facility. Lots of issues, lots of struggles. We're going through a new crisis just this past week. But we've been able to really parent differently, and Pathway really helped me accept that I could be a parent advocate, as opposed to she doesn't necessarily get to stay at home anymore. But we are still super involved in her life. We're the first people she calls when she needs something or it's all going to heck. So that's her. My son is the one with autism. He's doing awesome. He just graduated in the spring. He has come so far. Of all my kids, I feel like therapy changed our lives. Like it really helped him give words to what he was feeling and couldn't express. He's doing really well. He's got a job and he's graduated, and we're just excited. He's doing really well. And my youngest daughter is going to be a senior this year. We're struggling with all the things 17-year-olds struggle with. I'm just saying, girls at that age are a whole lot special. But she's doing fine. She's doing okay. She's still receiving therapy from Pathway. She's working through a lot of trauma that she's experienced in life, because you don't live in a home like ours and not carry some junk. And so we're okay with that. We're like, all right, let's get help. And so we're doing that. So that's kind of where our family is now. So thanks for letting me share.
No, thank you so much for sharing. I know, that's not easy to open up the windows and let someone in, because so many times I think us as humans, we want to be perfect. We want our kids to be perfect, and we want other people to think that we have the perfect marriage and the perfect house and the perfect kids and everything's great. And it's not. And it's hard. It's really, really hard. And it's hard for everyone. And then those children that have mental health issues or children that are coming from trauma, it's even harder yet. So Janelle touched upon our post-adoption kinship services, and we're going to spend a little bit of time kind of wrapping that up, and then we'll make sure we're done at 1. So adoptions, regardless of where you adopt, how you adopt, it's the best day. It's the day of hope. It's the day everyone is in love. It's new beginnings. And every parent goes into, this is going to be awesome. And we are going to be a loving family. And sometimes that happens, and sometimes it doesn't. It's harder than you think. It's hard to bond. It's hard to see past traumas kind of rear its ugly head. And you go, wait, we're supposed to be a family unit now. What's going on? And so Pathway has identified that that myth of happily ever after might not exist, and it's okay. And we work really hard with working with those families through support groups and programs, and really understanding that those parents might need to parent and come together differently than what we're used to and what our own experiences have been. So Faith is going to tell you a little bit about her path to Pathway. I'm so proud of myself that I even thought of that. And then we're going to wrap up. And then if there's any questions, we'll kind of talk about that as well. But Faith, why don't you share your story? We'd love to hear it.
Thanks, Kim. I appreciate you allowing me to be here today. I am a board member and have been for about 2 years, and don't always feel that I bring a lot of value to the board until about a month ago. I was asked to present a little bit on Pathway services to a local organization, and really felt for the first time I was doing something of value for Pathway. So what I'm going to talk to you about is the short presentation that I made to this organization. And the audience were just people that were not familiar with Pathway and wanted to learn a little bit more about it and what they might be able to do to support it. So first, our mission at Pathway is to help children and families realize the possibilities of their lives through foster care, adoption, and counseling. And we've heard a little bit about that today. But I want to tell you a story. 78 years ago in Alliance, Ohio, a little girl got dressed up for visiting day, and she waited expectantly in the sitting room of Fairmount Children's Home. She was careful to sit very still. She kept her best clothes wrinkle-free and clean because today could be the day. You see, every Sunday at Fairmount Children's Home was visiting day, and the hope that she had was almost more than she could stand, because today maybe somebody would see her. And if she was very, very good and she kept very, very clean, maybe someone would want her to be their own little girl. And her time at Fairmount, the time of being alone and unwanted, would be over forever. No more having her head shaved and washed in kerosene to kill the head lice. No more bullying at school, where everyone knew that the bald and barefoot kids were the ones from the home. No more being ashamed or being hungry every day of her life. And every Sunday, when no one came, her smile would get a little bit dimmer and her hope would fade just a little bit more. And after many, many months, she stopped dressing up and she stopped going to the sitting room at all. I know this story very well because that little girl was my mother, and she wore the scars of the physical abuse, the neglect, and the poverty, as well as scars of being a throwaway child by society for the rest of her life. 78 years ago, there was no Pathway caring for children to step in and rescue her, to nurture her and to help her develop those critical life skills for launching out on her own. Had Pathway been there for my mom, she would not have been left at the age of 6 to care for 3 younger siblings in the middle of winter for 2 full weeks. My grandmother tended to be a cliche. She ran off with the encyclopedia salesman that showed up at her door and left my 6-year-old mother in charge of the siblings. She would have been cared for by one of the loving, well-trained foster homes that are located throughout 14 Northeast Ohio counties that are serviced by Pathways network of quality and exceptional foster parents. Had Pathway been there for my mom, the foster family she lived with would have been especially trained in trauma care and the special needs of abused and neglected children. She would have received individual, group, and family counseling, all those wraparound support services that Pathway is known for that happen before, during, and after placement. But instead, she endured 10 years with an abusive foster family that used unwanted children as live-in servants and farm workers, sometimes a dozen at a time. When my mom faced aging out of the foster care system, she discovered limited work options and even fewer housing options that were available to her. She described the panic she felt trying to become self-supportive and learn life skills when she had no guidance from anyone and anywhere. So 3 months before she turned 18, she married my dad in order to stay off the streets. And guess what? Pathway Caring for Children could have met that need as well. Their Bridges program helps teens successfully launch when they reach the age of 18 by offering additional support in the areas of job search, continuing education resources, and apartment living. And those resources can last up to age 25. So that's one of my stories of why I got involved in Pathway. But what's the other one? Well, I got involved in Pathway because Pathway gets it. They do fostering and adoption very, very well. And how do I know that? Well, I am a board member and I review their financials and interact with their staff and families, but also because of my own 2 daughters who are adopted. I have seen adoption from both sides, and I would recommend Pathway to anyone, and that is not something that I ever say lightly. I was very naive as an adoptive parent because I just knew that love was the answer to any problem we could face. And then I got my kids and I found out, maybe not so much. The children are neglected and traumatized, and sometimes love isn't the full answer. My children deserve to have parents trained as thoroughly as the Pathway parents are trained. And frankly, we weren't trained at all. We were handed a baby. We were basically told, good luck. Had we had services available, we would have been more competent, we would have been more confident, and our girls would have had an easier adjustment. Likely, they would not be still dealing with the long-term issues that we are at ages 27 and age 25. These issues would have been anticipated by Pathway, they would have been identified, and they would have been addressed much earlier. So I serve on the board because I want other parents and other children to have what they need to be healthy individuals and families. Pathway does it right, and Pathway does it well. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you so much, Faith. You know, I wasn't planning on getting teary-eyed today, and that didn't work out too well, but that's okay. And Deb knows that I always say, I'm not a crier, but yet Deb sees me cry more than not. So maybe I am a crier. I don't know. But thank you so much for attending. So for those of you who are outside of the organization, again, I hope we accomplished the goal. You learned about the organization and you feel inspired to do something. I will follow up with each of you, whether you like it or not. And we'll just talk a little bit about that. And we'll have a really nice conversation about what your thoughts were. And we want to get better at really sharing who we are too. For those of you that are new to the organization, welcome. This is a great, wonderful group. I've been with the organization, it'll be 3 years this month. And I've never looked back. It's not a decision that I ever second guess. It's a wonderful, caring group for sure. In the chat is a survey. If you could please go to the survey, fill that out. That would be wonderful. And then you can eat lunch if you haven't eaten lunch. If you have, and you have that meeting at 1 o'clock, you still have a couple minutes to use the restroom and prep. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And for any new employees, if you ever come up to the Cleveland office, that's where I sit. So thank you very, very much. Have a great, wonderful day. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye. Thank you, guys.